I was secretly sending my sister money every week to help her survive, but at one family dinner, she proudly told everyone about her luxury vacation. And in that moment, I realized I had been completely played. Disclaimer: this story is a work of fiction created for entertainment and storytelling purposes only. All characters, events, names, and situations are purely imaginary and do not represent any real person or real-life incident. Any resemblance to actual people or events is purely coincidental. The evening started like any other family dinner, the kind that felt routine yet comforting. The table was already set when I arrived with neatly arranged plates, warm food filling the air with a familiar smell, and the low hum of conversation drifting from the dining room. My mother was busy serving dishes, making sure everything looked perfect, while my father sat at the head of the table, casually scrolling through his phone before dinner began. It was the kind of scene that should have made me feel relaxed, but something about that night felt slightly off, though I couldn't explain why at the time. I had just come back from work, exhausted from a long day that seemed to stretch on forever. My shoulders felt heavy, and my mind was still caught up in unfinished tasks and quiet worries about bills and responsibilities. Still, I pushed those thoughts aside as I stepped inside, forcing a small smile because that's what I always did. Family dinners were supposed to be a break from everything else, a place where nothing outside the house mattered. At least, that's what I used to believe. "Hey, you're late," my mother said gently, though there was no real annoyance in her voice. I nodded, apologizing briefly before taking my seat. My father glanced up, gave me a short nod, and returned his attention to the table. It all felt normal, predictable even. But there was one empty chair at the table. Emily wasn't there yet. I didn't think much of it at first. My sister had always been a little unpredictable, always running late or showing up at the last minute with some excuse that everyone seemed to accept without question. I had grown used to it over the years, even when it annoyed me. Still, something about her absence that night lingered in the back of my mind. We started eating without her. The conversation moved slowly at first, mostly small talk about work, neighbors, and things that didn't really matter. I tried to engage, but my energy was low. My thoughts kept drifting back to the messages Emily had sent me just days before. Messages filled with worry, stress, and desperation. "I don't know how I'm going to pay rent this month. I haven't eaten properly in days. I really need your help. You're the only one I can count on." Those words had stayed with me. They had pushed me to do things I didn't think I could afford. I had sent her money again and again, ignoring my own struggles because she was my sister, because I believed her. Then, just as my mother was about to serve another dish, the front door opened. The sound was sharp, almost too loud against the calm of the house. A moment later, Emily walked in. At first glance, everything about her seemed different. She wasn't dressed the way I expected. Instead of the worn-out clothes she usually complained about, she was wearing something expensive, something stylish that immediately caught everyone's attention. Her hair was perfectly done, her makeup flawless, and there was a confidence in the way she carried herself that didn't match the person who had been sending me desperate messages. "Sorry I'm late," she said casually, as if nothing was unusual. Her tone was light, almost cheerful. My mother smiled instantly. "It's okay, sit down. We just started." Emily slipped into her seat as if she belonged there without question. My father looked at her with mild curiosity, but he didn't say anything right away. I, on the other hand, couldn't stop staring. Something didn't add up. I tried to push the thought away, telling myself I was overthinking it. Maybe she had borrowed the clothes. Maybe something had changed. There had to be an explanation. But then she spoke again. "You won't believe it?" she said, picking up her glass with a small smile. "I just got back from Dubai." The words hung in the air for a moment, almost unreal. "Dubai." My mother repeated, her eyes widening with surprise. "You went on vacation." Emily nodded proudly, leaning back in her chair as if she had been waiting for this moment. "Yeah, it was amazing. 5-star hotel, private beach, the whole thing. Honestly, it was the best trip I've ever had." My father let out a low whistle, clearly impressed. My mother began asking questions immediately, her excitement growing with every detail Emily shared, but I couldn't hear them properly anymore. My mind had gone completely still. Dubai, luxury hotel, private beach. Each word felt heavier than the last, because just days ago, she told me she couldn't afford food. I felt a strange tightness in my chest, like something was slowly closing in. My hands rested on the table, but I barely noticed them. All I could think about were the countless times I had opened my phone, read her messages, and transferred money without hesitation. Every sacrifice I made flashed through my mind, skipping meals, cutting down my own expenses, ignoring my own needs, just to make sure she was okay. And now she was sitting across from me, smiling, talking about luxury as if it was normal, as if nothing had happened. I looked around the table. No one else seemed to notice anything wrong. My parents were smiling, proud even. To them, this was just good news, something to celebrate. But to me, it felt like something had just broken. I forced a small smile even though it didn't feel real. I nodded occasionally, pretending to listen, pretending everything made sense. But inside, a single thought kept repeating over and over again. Something wasn't right. I tried to act normal for the rest of the night, even though nothing inside me felt steady anymore. My sister kept talking, her voice light and full of excitement, as if she had just returned from the most perfect dream. She described tall buildings that touched the sky, rooms with glass walls, endless buffets, and shopping bags filled with expensive brands. Every word she spoke added another layer to the confusion already building in my mind. I nodded at the right moments, forced a small laugh when everyone else did, and kept my eyes on my plate most of the time. I didn't trust myself to look at her for too long. Every time I did, I saw two versions of her at once. The one sitting confidently at the table, and the one who had texted me late at night, claiming she had nothing left. My mother leaned forward, clearly fascinated. "But how did you afford all that?" she asked, her tone full of curiosity rather than suspicion. For a brief second, I noticed something change in Emily's expression. It was quick, almost unnoticeable, but it was there, a flicker, a hesitation. "Oh, I just managed," she replied casually, brushing it off with a small shrug. "I've been saving for a while." Saving. The word hit me harder than anything else she had said. I lowered my gaze, gripping my fork a little tighter. Saving from what? From the money I had been sending her. From the help she claimed she desperately needed just to get by. I remembered the messages clearly, like they were being replayed in my head. "I'm really struggling right now. I might get evicted if I don't pay soon. I haven't eaten properly in days." Each message had felt urgent, real, and painful to read. I had never questioned them. Why would I? She was my sister. And now she was sitting here, talking about luxury as if it had always been within her reach. My father chuckled softly. "Well, I'm glad you're finally enjoying yourself," he said. "You've always worked hard." Worked hard. I almost laughed at that, but I held it in. The irony was too sharp. I had been the one working extra hours, taking on more responsibilities, cutting corners in my own life just to make sure she was okay. And now, somehow, she was the one being praised. Emily smiled, clearly enjoying the attention. "Yeah, I guess I just needed a break," she said. "A break? From what?" I wanted to ask. The question sat right at the edge of my lips, ready to come out, but I stopped myself, because something didn't feel right about confronting her there in front of everyone. Not yet. Instead, I leaned back in my chair, watching her more carefully now. Every detail mattered. The way she spoke, the way she avoided certain questions, the way she quickly changed the subject whenever things got too specific. My mother asked about the hotel again. What was it called? Emily hesitated for just a second before answering. "Oh, it was one of those big resorts. I don't remember the exact name." That didn't make sense. Who forgets the name of a luxury hotel they just stayed in? But no one else seemed to notice. The conversation moved on, but I didn't let it go. I started paying attention in a different way now, not as a brother enjoying dinner, but as someone trying to piece together a puzzle. Every time she laughed, it felt slightly forced. Every time she explained something, it sounded just a little too vague. It wasn't obvious enough for anyone else to question, but it was enough for me. Because I knew her. Or at least, I thought I did. As the dinner continued, I spoke less and listened more. I replayed every interaction we had over the past few months in my head. The late-night calls, the emotional messages, the urgency in her voice when she said she needed help. None of it matched what I was seeing now. At one point, she glanced at me, probably noticing how quiet I had become. "You okay?" she asked, her tone light but slightly cautious. I met her eyes for a brief moment. "Yeah," I said, forcing another small smile. "Just tired." She nodded, accepting the answer without pushing further. But I could tell she was watching me now, just as I was watching her. There was something unspoken between us, something that hadn't been there before. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur. The laughter, the conversations, the clinking of plates, it all felt distant, like I was observing it from somewhere far away. But inside my mind, everything was becoming clearer. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This wasn't just bad timing or coincidence. There was a pattern here, and I was starting to see it. By the time dinner ended, I had made a decision. I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet, because if I did it now, she would deny everything. She would twist the story, make excuses, and somehow turn herself into the victim again, and everyone else would believe her, just like they always had. No, I needed something stronger than questions. I needed proof. As I stood up from the table and helped clear the dishes, I kept my expression calm, my movements normal. No one could know what I was thinking, especially not her. When I passed by Emily, I caught a faint scent of expensive perfume. It didn't match the story she had been telling me for months. It didn't match the image of someone struggling to survive. It matched something else entirely, something carefully hidden. And as I stepped away, one thought settled firmly in my mind, clearer than anything else that night. I wasn't going to ask her the truth, I was going to find it myself. The next morning didn't feel like a normal morning at all. I woke up earlier than usual, even though I had barely slept. My mind had been running all night, replaying every moment from the dinner, every word Emily had said, every expression she tried to hide. It was like my brain refused to rest until it made sense of everything. I sat on the edge of my bed for a while, staring at my phone. Part of me still wanted to believe there was some simple explanation, something I had missed, something that would make all of this feel less intentional. But the more I thought about it, the less likely that seemed. Finally, I picked up my phone and opened my banking app. My fingers hesitated for a moment before I tapped into the transaction history. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for, but I knew it had to start there. One by one, the records appeared on the screen. Transfers made every week. Sometimes small amounts, sometimes larger when she said things were urgent. I scrawled slowly. Each transaction told a story I had trusted without question. Rent, food, emergencies. That's what she had said. That's what I had believed. But now, looking at the total amount I had sent over the past 6 months, my chest tightened. It wasn't just help. It was a significant part of my own savings. Money I had worked hard for, money I had planned to use for my own future, and I had given it away without hesitation. I leaned back, running a hand over my face, trying to stay focused. This wasn't the time to feel sorry for myself. If I wanted answers, I needed to keep going. That's when something clicked in my mind. A small memory, almost forgotten. A few months ago, Emily had asked to use my email account. She said she needed it for a quick booking because she was having trouble accessing hers. At the time, I didn't think much of it. I gave her access without asking questions. Now, that moment felt important. I immediately opened my email and typed her name into the search bar. At first, nothing unusual showed up, just a few old conversations and random notifications. But then I noticed a different kind of email, a confirmation message from a travel website. My heartbeat quickened slightly. I opened it. It was a hotel booking confirmation, a luxury hotel in Dubai. The date matched exactly the time she said she had been struggling the most. I stared at the screen, trying to process what I was seeing. Maybe it was a one-time thing, I thought. Maybe someone else had paid for it. Maybe there was still an explanation. But I couldn't stop there. I scrolled further. Another confirmation email appeared. This time it was for a flight ticket. First class. My stomach dropped. I opened it slowly of what I would find next. The details were clear. Her name, the destination, the dates. Everything matched perfectly. I kept going. More emails. More confirmations. Spa reservations, restaurant bookings, shopping receipts from high-end brands I had only seen online. Each one painted a clearer picture than the last. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a pattern. I felt a strange mix of emotions rising inside me. Anger, disbelief, and something deeper that was harder to name. It wasn't just about the money. It was about trust. About the fact that every message she sent me had been carefully crafted to make me believe she was struggling. And I had believed every word. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees, staring at the screen as if it might suddenly change. But it didn't. The truth was right there, impossible to ignore. She hadn't just lied. She had planned it. Every message, every excuse, every emotional plea. It all led to this. A luxury life funded by my sacrifices. I closed my eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath, trying to steady myself. Reacting emotionally wouldn't help. I needed to think clearly. If I confronted her now, she would deny it. She would say there was an explanation, that I misunderstood something, that I was overreacting. And without solid proof in front of everyone, it would just turn into an argument I couldn't win. No, that wasn't enough. I needed something stronger. Something undeniable. I opened my email again and started organizing everything. I took screenshots of the confirmations, the receipts, the dates. I made sure every detail was saved, every piece of evidence clear and easy to understand. The more I gathered, the more real it became. There was no going back from this. At one point, I paused and looked at one of her old messages again. I don't know how I'm going to survive this month. The words felt different now. Empty. Calculated. I clenched my jaw slightly, feeling that same tightness return to my chest. This wasn't just about exposing her anymore. It was about making sure she couldn't lie her way out of it. I wanted her to face the truth the same way I had. Suddenly, completely with no escape, I sat there for a long time, going through every detail, making sure I hadn't missed anything. By the time I was done, I had everything I needed. Proof of the lies, proof of the betrayal, proof of how far she had gone. I set my phone down slowly, staring at the wall in front of me. The room felt quiet, almost too quiet, as if everything around me had paused. But inside, something had shifted. The confusion I felt the night before was gone. In its place was clarity, cold, sharp, and undeniable. I wasn't guessing anymore. I wasn't wondering. I knew the truth, and now, it was time to decide what to do with it. I could have confronted her the moment I gathered all the evidence. I had everything I needed. Proof that was clear, detailed, and impossible to deny. For a brief moment, the thought crossed my mind. I imagined walking up to her, showing her the screenshots, watching her reaction as the truth unfolded right in front of her. It would have been simple, quick, and direct. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that it wouldn't be enough. Emily had always been good with words. She knew how to twist situations, how to make herself look like the victim even when she wasn't. If I confronted her privately, she would find a way to explain everything. She would cry, deny, or shift the blame. And somehow, the truth would become unclear again. No, I needed something more controlled. Something where she couldn't escape, couldn't interrupt, couldn't manipulate the story. I needed a plan. I spent the rest of the day thinking carefully, going over every possible option. This wasn't just about exposing her. It was about doing it in a way that made the truth undeniable to everyone. There had to be no room for excuses, no chance for her to change the narrative. And then it came to me. Emily cared deeply about one thing, her image. She loved being seen as successful, independent, and admired. The way she carried herself at dinner, the way she spoke about her trip, the way she enjoyed the attention. It all pointed to that. Her reputation mattered to her more than anything else. So if I wanted to reach her, I had to do it where it would matter the most. In front of everyone. The idea settled into my mind quickly, and once it did, everything else started to fall into place. I would create a situation where she felt comfortable, where she expected nothing unusual, and then I would reveal the truth in a way she couldn't avoid. A gathering. Not just a regular dinner, but something that felt special enough to bring everyone together. Family, maybe even a few of her close friends. The more people there were, the harder it would be for her to deny anything. I picked up my phone and started making calls. First, my parents. I was thinking we should have a small family gathering this weekend. I said casually, keeping my tone light. It's been a while since we all sat together properly. My mother sounded pleased immediately. That's a great idea, she said. I'll take care of the food. My father agreed without much thought. To them, it was just another opportunity to spend time together. They had no idea what I was actually planning. Next, I reached out to a couple of Emily's friends. I had their contacts from previous events, and I kept my message simple. Hey, I'm hosting a small get-together this weekend. It would be great if you could come. Most of them responded positively. Emily was popular, and anything involving her usually attracted attention. That worked in my favor. By the time I was done, everything was set. The date, the time, the guest list. All that was left was to make sure Emily showed up without suspicion. That part was easier than I expected. When I mentioned the gathering to her, she seemed genuinely interested. Oh, that sounds nice, she said. I'll be there. Of course she would. It was another chance for her to be seen, to talk, to enjoy attention. Exactly what I needed. Over the next couple of days, I prepared everything carefully. Not just the event itself, but the way the truth would be revealed. I reviewed the evidence again and again, organizing it in a way that told a story from beginning to end. The messages, the bank transfers, the bookings. Each piece had to connect perfectly, leaving no gaps, no confusion. I even tested the setup, connecting my laptop to the TV, making sure everything displayed clearly. I couldn't afford any mistakes. If something went wrong at the wrong moment, it could give her an opportunity to interrupt or deflect. Every detail mattered. As the day of the gathering got closer, I noticed a strange sense of calm settling in. The anger I had felt before was still there, but it had changed. It was no longer overwhelming or chaotic. It was focused, controlled. I wasn't acting out of impulse anymore. I was executing a plan. On the day of the event, the house slowly filled with people. Laughter returned, conversations flowed, and everything looked exactly like a normal gathering. My mother moved around the kitchen, making sure everyone was comfortable. My father entertained guests with casual stories. Emily arrived dressed just as confidently as before, greeting everyone with a smile that seemed effortless. She blended into the crowd perfectly, laughing, talking, enjoying the attention. Watching her, it was almost hard to believe what I knew. Almost. I stayed quiet for most of the evening, observing everything. I made sure the atmosphere stayed relaxed, natural. No one could suspect what was coming, not even her. At one point, she walked over to me. "This is really nice," she said, glancing around. "You did a good job." I nodded slightly. "Yeah, I thought it was time we all got together." She smiled, completely unaware. That was the moment I knew everything was ready. The pieces were in place. The stage was set. All I had to do now was wait for the right moment, and when it came, there would be no turning back. The evening had reached its peak. The kind of moment where everything felt relaxed and effortless. Conversations overlapped, laughter filled the room, and no one seemed to notice anything unusual. Plates were half empty, glasses were being refilled, and the atmosphere carried a sense of comfort that made everyone feel at ease. It was exactly how I had planned it. I stood near the edge of the room for a while, quietly observing. My eyes moved from one person to another, taking in their expressions, their ease, their trust. My parents looked happy, surrounded by familiar faces. Emily was in the center of it all, as expected, telling another story, her hands moving as she spoke, her smile drawing attention without effort. She looked confident, untouchable. That illusion was about to end. I took a slow breath, steadying myself. This was the moment I had been preparing for. There was no hesitation left, no doubt. Everything I needed was ready. I stepped forward. "I want to say something," I said, raising my voice just enough to cut through the noise. The room gradually fell silent. Conversations faded, and all eyes turned toward me. The sudden shift in attention created a brief pause, a quiet curiosity that hung in the air. Emily looked at me, slightly surprised but still smiling. "What is it?" she asked lightly. I gave a small nod, acknowledging everyone before speaking again. "I'm really glad everyone could make it tonight," I began, keeping my tone calm and measured. "It means a lot to have everyone together like this." A few people nodded, some smiled, expecting a simple speech, maybe a toast. I turned slightly and reached for my laptop, placing it on the table near the television. The small movement didn't raise suspicion yet, but it caught Emily's attention. I noticed the faint shift in her expression as she watched me. I also wanted to talk about something important, I continued. The room grew quieter. I connected the laptop to the TV, the screen lighting up with a soft glow. For a brief second, nothing appeared except the blank display, and in that silence, I could feel the tension beginning to build, though no one fully understood why. Then the first image appeared, a message, Emily's message. "I don't know how I'm going to pay rent this month." A murmur spread softly through the room. People leaned forward slightly, trying to understand what they were looking at. Emily's smile faded just a little. Another message appeared. "I haven't eaten properly in days. I really need help." This time, the reaction was clearer. Confusion. Concern. A few people glanced at Emily, then back at the screen. I spoke again, my voice steady. "These are messages I received over the past few months." Emily shifted in her seat. "What are you doing?" she asked quietly, her tone no longer as relaxed as before. I didn't answer her directly. Instead, I clicked to the next slide. Bank transfers. Amounts. Repeated entries that showed a clear pattern. "I sent money every week," I said, letting the words settle. "Because I believed my sister was struggling." The room was completely silent now. No one was smiling anymore. I could feel every pair of eyes moving between me, the screen, and Emily. She shook her head slightly, her voice rising just enough to show panic. "This isn't necessary," but I continued. The next image appeared, a hotel booking confirmation, luxury resort, Dubai. The date matched one of her worst month. A soft gasp came from somewhere in the room. Emily's face changed completely. The confidence was gone. In its place was something else. Fear, mixed with disbelief that this was actually happening. I moved to the next slide, flight tickets. First class, then another, spa reservations, then another, shopping receipts from designer stores. Each piece of evidence added to the last, building a story that was impossible to ignore. "No," Emily whispered, shaking her head more firmly now. "This isn't what it looks like." But no one interrupted. No one defended her. Because the truth was right there, displayed clearly for everyone to see. I finally looked directly at her. "You told me you couldn't afford food," I said quietly. "You told me you were about to lose everything." My voice didn't rise, but the weight of the words filled the room. "And while I was helping you, you were living like this." The silence that followed felt heavier than anything else. Emily opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out at first. Her eyes moved quickly around the room, searching for support, for someone to step in, to stop what was happening. But no one did. My father's expression had hardened, the pride he once showed replaced with something colder. My mother looked shocked, her hands resting still on the table, as if she couldn't process what she was seeing. Emily finally spoke, her voice trembling. "I can explain." But even she didn't sound convinced. The room wasn't hers anymore. The control she once had over the narrative, over how people saw her, was gone. All that remained was the truth. Clear, unavoidable, and exposed in front of everyone she had tried to impress. And there was nothing she could do to stop it. For a few seconds, after everything was revealed, no one moved. It felt like time itself had paused, as if the room was trying to process what had just happened but didn't know how. The screen still displayed the last piece of evidence, glowing softly in the dim light while every person in the room sat frozen in place. Then the silence started to shift. Not loudly, not suddenly, but in small, subtle ways. A chair creaked as someone adjusted their position. A quiet whisper passed between two guests. Someone let out a slow breath they had been holding without realizing it. And at the center of it all was Emily. She looked completely different now. The confidence she had carried all evening had disappeared entirely, replaced by a kind of panic that she couldn't hide no matter how hard she tried. Her eyes moved quickly from one face to another, searching for something. Support, understanding, anything that could help her regain control of the situation. But there was nothing. Everyone was looking at her differently now. She shook her head again, more urgently this time. "This isn't what it looks like," she said, her voice unsteady. "You're misunderstanding everything." Her words sounded weak even to her own ears. I didn't respond immediately. I let the moment sit, let the weight of everything settle fully into the room. There was no need to rush. The truth had already done its job. My father was the first to speak. "You lied," he asked, his voice low but firm. It wasn't a question in the usual sense. It was a realization, spoken out loud. Emily turned toward him quickly. "No, I didn't lie, she started, but the sentence fell apart before she could finish it. "Then explain it," he said, his tone sharpening slightly. "Explain all of this." She opened her mouth again, but the words didn't come easily. For the first time, she didn't have a prepared answer. There was no smooth explanation, no clever way to turn the situation in her favor. "I was going to tell you," she said finally, grasping at something. "I just needed time." The excuse hung in the air, fragile and unconvincing. "Time for what?" My father replied. "To keep taking money." That question hit harder than anything else. Emily's shoulders tensed, and she looked down for a moment, as if avoiding eye contact could somehow make the situation less real. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she said quietly. My mother, who had been silent until now, spoke next. Her voice was softer, but it carried a deep sense of disappointment that was impossible to ignore. You told us you were struggling, she said. Me believed you. Emily looked at her, her expression shifting again, this time toward something closer to desperation. I was struggling, she insisted, though her voice lacked the strength it once had. Just, not in the way you think. The explanation didn't make things better. If anything, it made them worse. Around the room, people began to react more openly now. Some of her friends exchanged looks, their expressions filled with confusion and disbelief. A few of them leaned back in their chairs, creating a subtle distance, as if they no longer felt comfortable sitting so close to her. One of them spoke quietly, almost to herself. You asked me for money too. Emily turned toward her, eyes widening slightly. I was going to pay you back, she said quickly, but the pattern was clear now. It wasn't just me. The realization spread through the room like a ripple, changing the way everyone saw her in an instant. You used all of us, another voice said, louder this time. Emily shook her head again, more forcefully. No, that's not true, she said, though it sounded more like a reflex than a real defense. But no one was convinced anymore. The evidence was too strong. The story was too clear. Every attempt she made to explain only seemed made to confirm what everyone was already thinking. I watched quietly as everything unfolded. I didn't need to say anything more. This was no longer about me confronting her. It was about her facing the consequences of her own actions. My father leaned back slightly, his expression now completely serious. This isn't just a mistake, he said. This is betrayal. The word settled heavily in the room. Emily's eyes filled with tears, but even that didn't change anything. The sympathy she might have received before was gone. It had been replaced by something colder, something more distant. I didn't think it would matter this much, she said, her voice breaking. That's the problem. My mother replied softly. It does? Another silence followed, but this one felt different. It wasn't filled with shock anymore. It was filled with understanding. Everything was clear now. Emily wiped at her eyes, but the damage had already been done. The image she had built so carefully, the confident, successful version of herself, had collapsed completely in front of everyone, and there was no way to rebuild it in that moment. People began to shift in their seats again, but this time with purpose. Some avoided looking at her altogether. Others glanced at her briefly before looking away, as if they didn't know what to say anymore. The connection she once had with everyone in that room was gone, not because of what I had done, but because of what she had chosen to do. I stood there for a moment longer, taking in the scene. There was no satisfaction in it, no sense of victory, just a quiet understanding that something important had ended. Emily looked smaller now, not physically, but in the way she carried herself. The confidence, the control, the sense of certainty, it had all disappeared. In its place was the reality she could no longer avoid and the consequences she could no longer escape. After that night, nothing felt the same. The house, the conversations, even the way people looked at each other. It had all changed in a way that couldn't be undone. The gathering ended slowly, not with laughter or warmth like it usually did, but with quiet exits and uncomfortable goodbyes. People left in small groups, speaking in low voices, avoiding eye contact with Emily as they walked past her. No one knew exactly what to say, and maybe that was the clearest sign of all. I stayed where I was for a while after most of the guests had gone, standing near the same spot where I had revealed everything. The room felt emptier now, but at the same time heavier. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was filled with everything that had just happened, echoing in the background like something that refused to fade. My parents didn't speak much that night. My father moved around quietly, picking up dishes and clearing the table without his usual comments or small talk. My mother sat for a long time, her hands resting in her lap, her expression distant as if she was still trying to process it all. Emily had disappeared into her room before the last guests even left. I didn't follow her. There was nothing left to say that hadn't already been said. Over the next few days, the impact of that night became clearer. It wasn't loud or dramatic, it was subtle, but strong enough to change everything. The messages slowed down, the calls stopped. The usual rhythm of communication between Emily and everyone else began to break. Her friends, the same ones who used to surround her, started keeping their distance. Some of them sent short messages at first, asking if she was okay, but those didn't last long. Trust, once broken in that way, didn't repair itself easily. I noticed it in the small things. Fewer notifications on her phone, no more late-night laughter from her room, no more plans being made. The silence around her grew day by day. My parents changed too, though, in a different way. They didn't confront her again, at least not openly. But their behavior spoke for itself. The easy trust they once had was gone, replaced by something more careful, more distant. My father became quieter around her, his conversations short and to the point. My mother still tried to maintain some sense of normalcy, but even she couldn't hide the disappointment in her eyes. It wasn't anger anymore, it was something deeper, and harder to fix. As for me, I expected to feel something stronger after everything was over. Maybe satisfaction, maybe relief, maybe even regret. But what I felt was different. It was calm. Not the kind of calm that comes from happiness, but the kind that comes when something heavy is finally lifted. For months, I had carried the weight of responsibility, believing I was helping someone who truly needed it. I had put my own needs aside without questioning it. Now, that weight was gone. The truth had replaced it. I didn't have to wonder anymore. I didn't have to question whether I was doing the right thing or being too harsh. Everything was clear, and that clarity gave me something I hadn't realized I was missing: freedom. I started focusing on my own life again, slowly at first. I paid more attention to my work, my routines, the things I had neglected while trying to support someone else. It wasn't about moving on quickly or pretending nothing had happened. It was about rebuilding something that had been quietly worn down over time. Every now and then, I would see Emily around the house. Our interactions were brief and neutral. There were no arguments, no emotional conversations, no attempts to revisit what had happened, just distance. A quiet understanding that things were different now. One evening, I saw her sitting alone in the living room. She wasn't on her phone, wasn't talking to anyone, wasn't doing anything at all. She just sat there, staring ahead as if she was lost in her own thoughts. For a moment, I wondered what she was thinking, whether she regretted it, whether she understood the impact of her actions. But I didn't ask. Some answers weren't mine to hear anymore. What mattered was that the truth had been revealed, not hidden, not ignored. It had changed everything, even if it didn't fix everything. And maybe that was the point. Not every story ends with things going back to the way they were. Some endings are about change, about understanding, about accepting that certain lines once crossed can't be uncrossed. As I moved forward, I carried that lesson with me. Trust wasn't something to give blindly, even to the people closest to you. And silence, when used carefully, could be more powerful than any argument. Because in the end, it wasn't the confrontation that changed everything. It was the truth being seen by everyone at once. Thank you for watching until the very end. This story shows how betrayal can come from the people you trust the most, and how patience, observation, and strategy can sometimes speak louder than words. Remember, trust is earned, not given, and sometimes silence is the beginning of the strongest form of justice. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more real, life-inspired stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload, and let us know in the comments. What would you have done if you were in this situation?